Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who will never grow old and will never die, but must feed.
Tim Longo. Wow, what is that about?
Well, we kind of texted a little bit the other day about Edward Herrmann. Who was the lead vampire in The Lost Boys.
Yeah,
That's a little Lost Boys 30-year tribute for you. I'm now curious how many in our audience are younger than 30, because that's kind of scary.
That's gone over a lot of heads just now.
I bet it has.
Including mine for a moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, The Lost Boys may have the most 80s saxophone player ever. There's a scene where there's some party and there's a saxophone player jamming out on the beach or whatever.
That's not good.
It's a thing of beauty. As a high school saxophone player, I really appreciated it, I'll tell you.
I didn't know you played the saxophone.
I did.
My dad did as well, and my sister. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I did. I played in jazz band, marching band, all that stuff.
That explains a lot.
My older son played my very own saxophone when he was in high school.
That's what my sister did. Yeah.
I handed it down, and he has it, and I haven't seen it in a couple of years.
So you were a band geek, and I was a theater nerd.
Yeah, go figure.
Explaining a lot.
It sure is. Yeah. But unless we're going to play, unless we're going to play a little Koji Kondo music on the saxophone, I think maybe we ought to turn instead to our video game.
We would pay good money to see you do that. Yes, Super Mario.
Only until they heard me play. It's been a long time.
And they would take the money back. Super Mario World. Man, this game. Whew.
This game, I tweeted about this on the Dev Game Club account, that this game may be the one that breaks you, and then later on I was like, maybe it's the one that's going to break me.
Well, just to get out of the way, I have one saving grace, as we talked about over text, right? And it's unfair,
right? And about the Zelda cast as well.
I've already proclaimed it a semi exploit, and I feel bad every time I use it, but I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could survive, not on our schedule at least. I was talking to a friend at work. Who is an enormous Nintendo fan. I love talking to him because he's so deep knowledge. And I was telling him we were playing for the podcast, and he's like, oh, yeah. I have Super Mario World, 4 different versions on every different, 4 different consoles. And I have 3 save games in each of the games, in each of the slots with all of the stars. He's a completionist. He's done it 12 times. 12 times, and he's like, oh yeah, and then he started talking about secret levels and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, dude, I'm going to be lucky to make it through this thing at all. But it is, all that being said, the one thing I definitely wanted to say, though, as I played in the second session is, and as I said last episode, it's not necessarily my jam, and I have a couple more thoughts on why that is as I'm playing. But I really respect this thing. You can't not. It is.
No, you can't.
It is a work of art, for sure.
It is pretty, and I think we'll get into that. I do want to, I actually think I have some contributing factors maybe to my issues. I think I may have either TV lag.
Oh, yeah, could.
Lag, because I'm using component input to my TV, but TV is an HDMI, HD TV. So for all I know, it's downscaling and dropping a frame. And so my inputs, I'm basically inputting against a frame behind.
I feel like I've heard that from somebody else.
That would explain a lot. Yeah, that was a real problem with Rock Band originally when it came out, or not Rock Band, Guitar Hero, because people would pop that thing in there and, on these newer TVs, but the downscale or rescaling, I guess, is what's happening there, would mess up and they drop a frame. And so I'm going to probably dig into that more, because I think I today spent 30 attempts or more on the Vanilla Dome Ghost House. Yeah. At least 30 attempts. And often
I did
would
too,
die.
but yeah.
Yeah, but you had to save
make it.
Yeah, I didn't quite make it either, and we'll get to that. But so I think that's an issue, and I also think I think about it. I haven't played a ton of 2D platformers at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I have played the original Super Mario Brothers, and I do think I have maybe this Super Mario World 2 or something like that on a DS cart, but I didn't play very much of that. And I've played some modern ones with like Rayman Legends, but mostly my platformer experiences with 3D platformers, and I feel like that's a totally different beast and something we'll probably cover a
Sure.
little bit
Oh
in
yeah,
the
for
email
sure.
this week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's intentionally not necessarily. I was going to say slop, but that's not the right word. There's just a different kind of precision with 3D, right? Where
right, I mean,
there's more
it's sort of
analog.
similar to Half Life in that there's a little momentum, a little you have to
Yeah,
pull back on the stick to assist the stop. For example,
you mean in
I was
3D? Or
no in this. I mean,
in this? Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're moving along, you definitely have it's not a super frictional surface, and so you end up having to counter motion if you want to correct. So you're constantly correcting a little bit. I actually played another platformer this week, also 2D. It's got weapons in it too, so it's a little bit different. But it's called Cave Story. It's by an independent Japanese developer.
hmm
It's on the Switch.
yeah. It's some kind
Recently
of
re-released for the Switch.
infamous indie game.
Yes,
It's on everything.
it is, and it's unusual because there aren't it's maybe the first kind of well-known game from a Japanese independent developer,
Yeah.
and he's a particular fan of Nintendo, so he puts it on all their platforms. But um, I played that this week, and it was the same sort of thing where a lot of the control felt a little, I don't want to say sloppy, but it was. I had to do more work
Yeah.
than I think I'm used to with 3D platformers, and I think 3D platformers will assist you with that, have more friction because you have a natural additional degree of difficulty with precision because you're in this 3D environment, and so depth perception isn't perfect, and etc. So I think that there's reasons, and someday we'll talk about a 3D platform, and I think we'll get into it more then. But
Well,
so
and then
those are kind of my contributing factors to
yeah,
why I stink.
yeah, yeah. Well, and the other interesting little tidbit I picked up from this conversation I had at work with Chris is this guy's name, and he was talking about those runs, those save games I was just talking about, and he was talking about this. I won't spoil anything, but there's a super secret, I guess, section toward the end of the game that's really hard to get to, and you have to use the cape to get to it. And he said as a kid he remembers getting 100 lives stacked up so he could do it. And he said, and he used the word kind of just off the cuff as we were talking, but it stuck with me. He basically just said sense memory, right? Or muscle
Mm-hmm.
memory. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the thing. I feel like with the 3D platformers, there's less of a requirement for that, but I can see how that is really a lot about what what this genre is about, right? It's that you kind of need to get into this zoned out state in a way, right? If you're thinking too, like that's what I end up doing. I overcorrect. I think too hard. Like I try to, I talked about this last episode. I try to apply tactics and strategy to but it's like, it's not for that, like you can predict things, but because there's patterns, but you gotta go, you gotta go with it, and you gotta like just kind of inherently, like muscle memory, like you said, understand how it works, like you said with the momentum, which I guess my memory is bad on this because it's got to be the case in Super Mario Brothers 1 as well, but I don't remember the landing momentum being the same as extreme, but it must be there because the
I
physics
feel like it is. I think this
yeah,
physics is pretty similar.
yeah, it's
With
got to be.
it has the additions of different elements, but I do feel like this feels like Mario to me. I mean, it definitely feels. I mean, certainly, I played that Super Mario 2 or whatever.
It's too
Um,
perfect to not be. Yeah,
right. I think it's just the very finely tuned version of what was in Super Mario Brothers.
yeah,
It feels very similar to me. I definitely can remember kind of skidding to a stop in Super Mario Brothers. So I have to say, it may not be identical, but I think it's very close. And even later, like for example, New Super Mario Brothers has a very similar feel to me. So
mm,
I think they're just using the same the same code for movement years and years later. Believe it or not,
Yeah, I mean,
and you
why
certainly
not?
could. It's all tiles.
Yeah,
It doesn't really matter, you know. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's. Oh, and then the other thing I was going to say when it comes to that, um, because this is also a dumb Tim question that I'm forgetting because, like I said last time, I've really only finished Super Mario 1 when it comes to the 2D platformers. The first game, you couldn't go backwards to the left, right? You could only go forward. Am I correct
I
on that?
believe you can. I believe you can go back a little bit,
A little
but
bit, but it's not
not
in
very far.
this game. You can, right? I mean, you can. I just find myself like it's sort of a blessing and a curse because I find myself going backwards to reset enemies or to feel like if I miss something, you know what I mean? So it kind of opens up the choice space quite a bit
Right.
in a given level because, yeah, and obviously in some jumps you can't go back. It's a one way ticket, but a lot of times you can actually just kind of run backwards if you want to and do certain things, especially in like that ghost level we were talking about where there's some, it's not
Well,
like
and the
I wouldn't
ghost
call it
levels are
exploration,
definitely
but
right.
yeah.
The ghost levels are definitely different in that
Yeah, they
they're
are. They are.
they're they're
They're more
mechanically
puzzles.
meant.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They're meant to make sure you understand concepts, I think, about how you're moving through the space and how the space is connected and making you replay things. That's sort of the spooky element that you're going back to a place that you've been before and nothing it's reset and you're
Yeah.
having to deal with it again, trying to find the way to the actual exit. And often that's in the first one that's fairly straightforward. In the second one, it's a little more complicated, and that's where we ended up stopping. I
Yeah.
finally got to the end of that level once or twice, and ended up going back in the first half of the level through the door, and was like, "Oh no, I have to do it
Hmm.
again." I've gotten very good at the first part of that level. I can do it perfectly now. I almost never lose a life there, but that second half
With the green
is
blobs.
with the green blobs is
Yeah.
killing me.
Yeah. That's that muscle memory thing again. Where like what you just said. There's like you have the first part down, and I
Exactly.
think there's a certain amount of
I
gratification that
haven't. I
really.
haven't. I haven't. Well, I haven't internalized the green blobs yet. Whereas I've internalized all the rules of the first part.
Yeah. I
The
don't feel like.
timing of those
Yeah.
the circles with the gaps, the
Yeah.
timing of the jumps, and knowing that the boos, intuitively knowing when to move where for the boos to come at me.
I love that mechanic, by the way.
It's a terrific mechanic.
Yeah.
The big
Famous.
boo, right? There's a big boo that comes at you in the second half of the first part, and you have to jump up onto that block so that he's elevated, so that you can run under him. All that stuff is just I can practically do that in my sleep now. It's the second part that I've only gotten through, a couple of times, and I ended up having the cape to do that because how I get all my lives is I go way back to the beginning of Donut Plain. And at the beginning of Donut Plain, there's two opportunities to gain lives in there. One is you can go into a pipe that you play that little jumping game to knock 3 blocks and try to turn them into O's. They're just random order. You found this, right? This isn't news to you.
I haven't found very many secret areas.
Okay, you do know that sometimes you can go into blocks.
Into blocks?
I mean pipes.
Oh no, I do, and I try a few of them, but I'm racing enough to where I don't try every one, so I know I'm missing and skipping some.
Okay.
I haven't found any of the other Switch palaces, which I don't know. There's some that
It feels like there has to be another one.
we're missing two at
vanilla.
least. There's like a
Yeah.
red and a green or something. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I think you're right. So and that might actually make some things easier. But
Yeah, exactly.
in the beginning of Donut Plains, the very first level of Donut Plains, there's an upside down pipe that you can jump up into. It's fairly early in the level, and you can
Yeah.
jump up and push up as you're jumping, and you go into it from the bottom, and then there's this little kind of it's hard to even call it a game, but there's like rows of blocks that you're jumping up, but each of them has 3 little power blocks in it, and if you push them in the right order, you get a 1-up. And the order's random, and you can't memorize it, so you just are guessing each level as you go up. There's like 6 or 7 levels of just jumping up, so you can get 6 or 7 shots to get a 1-up. And then you come out of that, you drop out of a pipe, and if you go back just a couple of tiles, there's another pipe you can jump up on top of and go down into. And that takes you to a world where you can get the cape. And if you get the feather, and that gives you the cape. So you get the cape, you run up this long pipe, go to the top, and there's a ton of coins up there. And you basically have to run with the cape and fly and fly and fly. You could fly and kind of float down and just get a ton of coins in there if you're patient. So normally I can get 5 or 6 lives just doing this. And because at any point, if you go back to a level that you've completed, you can exit it at any time just by pressing start and holding it and then pressing select. And that will take you back out to the map. Aha! These are the things that happen to you because you're not paying attention, because you can just use the save state.
I'm save stating like I'm save scumming, really, right?
Yes.
And it is. I'm going to get a different experience. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I have the fortitude to not use it, but you're getting a different experience for sure. So
I definitely am.
Is that? I assume that's in the manual. The fact that you can go back and just exit. So you mean you're literally in the middle of a level?
I was told about it in gameplay.
What?
I know I was told about it in gameplay. It was in one of the first levels in the first.
Maybe I missed it. Okay.
The first handful.
Huh.
I'm sure it's also in the manual. I do have the manual.
Yeah, I did read the manual because I was trying to figure out that ghost area. Maybe I was missing something, but it must talk about being able to pick that power block up, and I didn't see it in the manual. But anyway, continue.
That actually is also described in gameplay at some point. So these are things that you can do. Pick things up and do things with it.
No, I did see the one where you can pick things up. I guess specifically those blocks. I don't remember it saying you can pick those up. I don't try picking everything up, because those pop out of the ground. I kind of guess I felt they appear, right? So I felt like it was kind of attached. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So yeah,
so I keep going back to that point, and
you're mastering the
I'm
life farming.
Exactly. And so I'll get 4 or 5, and if I'm lucky, I'll get several in that one area. And I'll just go out and I'll just do it again. So I've also internalized the beginning of that level. I still will occasionally lose I'll go from Big Mario to Little Mario or whatever at some point getting there. But I get there and you automatically get a feather and you...
Yeah.
So that's how I've been charging up. Like I'll go and I'll just get 20 lives before I start a new level.
Yeah.
So I can just push through the beginning part of that again and again and again. And then once I feel like I'm getting a good sense of the beginning part, I'll go get some more lives so that I can get to the tape midway and have enough lives to do the second half.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah. There's...
I spent... my game launched today, and I basically had nothing to do today because the game was done and it wasn't out yet.
Congratulations.
So I had this window. Thank you. And so there was 6 hours where I just sat and tried Vanilla Dome 1. I mean, it's bizarre to me because there are levels where I spend 30 lives trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And then the next level I'll go through on the second try. For example, there was a level that the level automatically scrolled, and if the left edge ever touched you, you were dead.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's that one. There was a swimming level.
I'm looking at Vanilla 1 now on that site that we found, so you can look at the levels, side by side. Yeah, that's a rough one. I remember that one.
That was particularly bad. But then Vanilla 2, which was the one in the water, second try.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like there was one where you have to get to a point, maybe it was the castle, maybe it was Morton's castle, where you get to a point and you bump a block and you get a star, and you have to just run through the rest of the level as fast as you can because otherwise you'll sink into the lava.
Yeah.
And that one, again, same thing, third try. So I feel like I'm getting something.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at something.
Yeah.
But there's some things I just can't get. And I wonder if I'm too slow, too fast. I try to speed up sometimes, and I get killed because at the time I'll jump. I mean, I'm just getting a little slower in the reaction times as I get older, and I can't. By the time I read that I need to jump, it's too late.
Yeah.
and now I jump straight into something, and it's a little crazy making, but
that's the fascinating part of it, though. That there's such an and I know we got a lot of mail this time for good reason and about this game, and I can tell, like I said earlier, I can appreciate it and really respect it because I can tell why it's such a beloved game. Because there's an elegance to it, right? There is a purity, and then as we talked about in pre-show, I wanted to talk about some memorable levels because the level design, like when it comes, I talk a lot about level design, obviously, for many of the series that we've done, but I'm looking at the site that we found that kind of has just a side view, literally pixel for pixel, for each level. And, just the craftsmanship that goes into these suckers, and the purity of using the mechanics in interesting combinations. But each individual mechanic, maybe we talked about this some last time, is fairly simple, right? When it comes to whether it's an enemy mechanic or a block mechanic or, but man, they are just so good at combining. I'd say this is, I've been comparing from a Nintendo mentality perspective. I've been in my head comparing this to Super Metroid quite a bit, and kind of thinking about, I don't know, trying to distill down some of their own like company pillars, if you will, or design principles, which obviously people have been doing since for eons. So it's not anything new, but I guess I just haven't really sat down and compared the two games very much. And there are a lot of similarities in the mentality of those kinds of concepts of like taking this one simple thing and turning it on its head or combining it with other simple things to make complexity and depth,
Yes. And they introduce those things in a very natural way.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the level that has the three platforms on like chains or rods or whatever, spinning around a central hub. And you learn a lot from those things just in the course of that simple level where you jump onto one, it's like, okay, I get this. And then it's timing to jump on a second one or another moving platform. So you're learning some of the timing and really just being comfortable with your basic jump mechanic at that point. Then you're doing things like jumping up off a platform to hit a button, but then you want to come down and back onto the place that you are so you can advance the track.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's Donut 3.
Donut 3, right.
Yeah.
And there's a place where you can get a mushroom, or if you already have a mushroom, you can get a feather, I believe, by jumping into a power block in the center of one of those three rotating rod things. Yeah. And that's teaching you, you can jump back to the one before. So there's a lot of things that are going on here.
It's very,
and it's just using combinations of these elements that you've seen before. You want to get that power block because, it has a goodie in it, right? So you want that. And it just presents you with that minor puzzle of how do I do that? And probably you fail the first time. The thing pops out and it runs off the side and it falls and you miss it because you didn't think to jump back and get at it. You didn't think, I can land on that thing. So it teaches you that, which you kind of need for some of those furry black things that chase you. I'm terrible with all the names of the creatures in these things. So apologies. But so you're learning lots of little strategies and mechanics for the levels, but they themselves are composed of very simple elements.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just fantastic. How these games are put together.
Well, it's that sort of, it's the osmosis, assimilation, education side of that. It's that unspoken thing that we often talk about when it comes to onboarding players, that I don't think almost anybody is good at, to be honest, other than Nintendo and a few others. where you need to teach the player. You need to teach them without them realizing you're teaching them. And they need to learn before they need to learn organically and kind of know that, become adept at what they need to become adept at without realizing it, and before they know it, they're able to do it. And that's kind of, I guess, is a roundabout way to kind of respond to your question about, like, to yourself about, like, what am I missing, or what am I not quite grokking? Because there's this, I don't know, there's this deeper psychological play that's going on in our heads when you play a game like this that everyone's going to respond to a little differently, and when it clicks, it's going to click, but I don't think anyone can necessarily predict what it is that's the blocker, and I don't know, it's just super complex for such a simple concept. It's just obviously it's dumb for me to say this, but I underestimated how complex things really are here, but it's still fun, it's fun to play. I don't get overwhelmed, but with trying, it's just kind of executing on it is what gets me overwhelmed. But there is just the elegance to it is just something else. And I've often kind of thought about, like, how they'll never tell us, but I really would love to know, to your point about, like, those small moments of teaching that they very intentionally put in there to kind of build this repertoire in your head of things that without you realizing it. I really want to know how they roll those out, and, like, if it's leaning on play testing, like we talked about with Valve, or whether it's some sort of, design discipline and principles that they enact in the studios, or what it is. But there's just or is it just playing it over and over and over again? There's just this pacing to that rollout, that onboarding that is so finely tuned. I want to know how they do it. I want to know what and it's probably changed over time. I mean, I think we talked about this before, maybe with the Link to the Past or something. But they have been talking quite a bit about Breath of the Wild for Nintendo. I've been surprised.
And I think I have heard that Miyamoto would just run around and grab people to play the game.
Yes, that is a known story. Yeah.
From
everybody in the company,
inside the company, exactly.
Yeah, everyone in the company plays, and that's what Valve and Blizzard and everyone. I think a lot of this is really successful, and we try to do it, right? Everyone tries to do it, but I don't know if, like, grabbing, the janitor or the receptionist is going to attain what I'm talking about. I feel like there needs to be at least some rigor in there of, like, or maybe it's just in the level designer's hands, and they just have really finely tuned their craft or something. I don't know. I'm kind of meandering a bit, and there's a deeper thing going on here that just is kind of flabbergasting me, and that's the other thing that I fully underestimated is I guess I forgot this about Super Mario 1, but it really is a game about not, I was going to say farming, but it's a game more about preparation than I realized. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where you got to go farm for lives. It's also beneficial to go and get power up. So when you go to the next space, you're prepared. And I think in my head, psychologically, or, I don't know, intellectually, I always kind of just thought to myself, well, Mario games that's the platform where every level is fresh. I said it in the first episode.
Sure.
And that's the purity of it. It's like, well, you have everything you need all the time. It's right there at your hands. And technically that's true for every level. But if you really want to succeed and be better and not make your life hell, you should do some prep. And in fact, for lives, you basically have to. You won't probably, unless you're a savant, you probably won't make it, right?
Right. No, I definitely feel like this was not a game that anybody took home and finished in a few hours.
No.
Because the means of learning in this game is failure.
Yeah, that's one of my notes.
and for me, I feel like that's something we deliberately tried to get away from.
Oh yeah.
Certainly when we were coming up, it definitely felt like that was a thing that people were trying to avoid. I think we have, yes.
Yeah. And then Demon Souls and others have brought it back, and yeah.
Exactly. And those are games also where you need to prepare. You need to go and farm those flasks or whatever that it is that you can use to heal yourself during battles and things like that. But it feels like this. I mean, the number of ways I've failed in just the first part of Donut Plains 1. There's
Donut Plains 1.
Yes, that's the one with the dudes with capes. And there's a flower that spits little fireballs, and this is where I found, a pipe I could go into, and then another pipe I could go into and get the cape and all that.
Oh, stuff. I did find that room you're talking about. Why did I not figure? Okay, keep going though. Don't interrupt.
That's fine. I probably didn't describe it super well. But so I would die because I would jump into the guys. Okay, that's obvious, right? I would die because they started flying, and I had a mushroom, and they flew into me, and I wasn't expecting it because they kind of run and jump, and I expected them to land, but they started flying. I came down, and I actually discovered you could get a feather from some of them.
Yeah, you can.
If their cape is flashing like yellow and red,
if you
land on them, they will fall, and they will drop the feather. Whereas the ones with just the pure yellow capes will just fall. These are all things that were accidents. I didn't set out let me figure out what I can learn about these things. I just failed or randomly succeeded. I just happened to land on the thing. I got hit by the helmeted football thing that throws. Well, I guess it's a baseball thing because I think it throws baseballs at you. I landed on top of him, and then I stepped into him while he was crushed and died. I'd have to take a video. It would be absurd the number of times I died in that first section. It took me forever to get past that one as well. And once I did, I now had a place where I could go. It took me a long time to be just good enough to just get to where I can get the extra lives. Now I can just do that. I don't die anymore. But for a long time, it was okay, I hope I can get in there and only lose one fewer than the number of lives I'm going to gain so that I can actually win a little bit going through this. So it took, and it was all just iterative failure. I fell into holes, every bad thing that could happen would happen. And that was how I ultimately figured out how to get to where I was going. And
the one thing I'll say about, because we talked about it before, but I think it's really more appropriate for this game than others we've talked about, the subject on failure or learn through failure. I wonder, this isn't a well-formed theory, but I wonder, and I'm trying to think back, as you said, as we were coming up, this was a hot topic always. I feel like what ended up happening, because games like this and sort of those classic legacy games did use failure as a means to teach people. I guess it's sort of and they were so well done and, I don't know, I'll say perfectly balanced or what have you, right? Still can be frustrating, but they're elegant games, as we talked about. But it kind of gave permission to other developers as they were coming up to say, well, this is how Nintendo does it, or this is how X group does it. And they had great success with their games, so we're going to do the same thing. But I think maybe people didn't realize or didn't think of, and this is all hindsight, of course, that you can do that, but you still have to do it well. Failing, just teaching people. You have to be
teaching, exactly.
Yeah, teaching people just to fail through failure. And actually, now this is dawning on me, the reason it came up a lot for me in my past was Tomb Raider. Because the original Tomb Raider games were a lot about that, and we would talk a lot about oh man, it's so frustrating because that trap you wouldn't have known unless you died. The original Tomb Raider game taught you a lot through failure. Yes, but I don't think they did a good job at it, right? It was unfair failure. It was failure that felt, backstabby and just very unfair. And so it frustrated
and I think
people.
they lacked the visual fidelity, that being an early 3D game, to telegraph some of that stuff. So you couldn't actually learn the rules of the world. You just had to learn the world.
Yeah, I think some of it, that could have helped. I still think, regardless of visual fidelity, they could have made different, and I'm, whatever, I'm not perfect, but they could have made different, because again, this is a 2D pixel game, right? 16-bit. Like, you can do a lot if you're thinking things through, and I guess I'm just saying, like, it became a crutch for a lot of people. Like, well, they, learning through failure is just a trope. Everyone can do that, but it's not that simple. Like, you have to actually methodically think about how you're teaching.
You have to be learning something other than failure.
Yeah, exactly, and just doing it for the sake of, and I guess you have to stretch your designs to make sure that. It's hard. It's obviously very hard. I think I've said this on the cast before, and I preach this to the team sometimes, and I don't think I always even practice what I preach, but to be honest, but like, it's not about making our lives as developers easy, our decisions. It's about making the player's life easy, and just because something's hard for us, doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, because it might be the right thing to do for the design. And I think finding the right ways for players to fail is a hard thing for designers to do. It's very difficult. Obviously, from this game, you can tell. So maybe that's what, and so then our response, and my Tomb Raider example is like, well, that games of that era are teaching you through failure, and it's very frustrating. So we're going to fight that. And so we're not going to teach you that way anymore, right? So we had this sort of, response. And then ultimately, Demon Souls and those sorts of games these days are coming back and saying, no, if you do it right, it'll be okay. And it's a good way to teach people, and people like it, and I don't know. I'm just I'm thinking about this on the fly, but it's fascinating.
Certainly, yes. I mean, it's a different sort of school of thought.
Yeah.
Todd Howard would say, fun does not mean challenge.
Yeah.
They're not, to say they're not, equals. That's not the only way to
They're
get
kind
to
of
fun.
orthogonal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Bethesda games are not meant to be challenging games per se. I mean, there are ways to play them that will make them more challenging, but that's not necessarily the default mode. These games, however, are more about challenge, and they appeal to that sort of player. And I feel like we had to get away from fun meaning challenge in order to broaden the audience.
Yeah.
Because I think a game in the Nintendo style requires the dedication that so many, tweens and younger, or maybe in that kind of age range, had at their disposal, but that many people don't. I think it's a tough thing to ask somebody to master.
Yeah.
These
you
games
broke up there a little bit, but I
games
didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we got back up.
So on the kind of related to this, the sort of failure, and then kind of the difficulty topic as well. As I've been saying, I've been trying to kind of analyze my relationship with platformers or something as we're going through this. And you mentioned learning through failure. So there's sort of like a, a triumvirate, like a threesome there of notions that are coming to my mind that I had last night. You just added the third one, though, and that's sort of learning through failure, which is frustrating to me when I feel like my skill is not there. The other one that I put on my notes is digital failure. And what I mean by that is, and, when I think about, we talk about with Half-Life and shooters or a lot of the genres I like, there's, and games with more, kind of leaning more on tactics than just pure skill. Though there is kind of a meta strategy to this game because you can go backwards because of the world structure. But digital failure is like, if you touch one pixel on a dude in the wrong time, it's over. And yes, you could have a power up, right? And that'll give you a little bit of analog. But if you don't have a power up, like, there's no margin of error, And that frustrates the heck out of me. And I've realized, with a shooter or whatever, you have a health bar, right? Or you have something that is an analog in nature that at least if you're getting shot, you can usually have some time to react. And I think because of my frustration with my own poor skill, anytime I'm playing a game with such digital failure that's precise, it comes with great reward, I guess, if you can master it and you feel like you're good at it. But
right. Well, and I think you're a person who, because you've played a lot of first-person shooters, you also really admire and enjoy high lethality games, such as Rogue Spear or.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But I
Yeah,
think that comes of having played with the LEC Quake guys and all that stuff to be so good at the
yeah,
shooters that you take it upon yourself. You already have the skill
yeah,
that you've earned at the hands of your merciless human opponents in deathmatch. And here, I don't think you ever. The game is the game, and you're having to meet the game standard rather than
yeah. I'm
starting
catching.
to play with a group of players who all start at the same time, for
Yeah,
example.
no, I'm
And
catching up. Yeah, talking to Chris
exactly, and
today.
growing together.
I mean, he clearly was talking about some of his childhood adventures with this game, right? And so he's been playing it his whole life, basically, right? And so that's a different relationship for sure. I think the one difference, I think it's a good, fair point about high lethality shooters. I think the one difference for me is there's something different if somebody else has shot you and it's digital failure and it's very high lethality. If I'm the one making the mistake, I guess maybe I just am too hard on myself. I get too frustrated. It was like, oh, my toe. That just happened to me last night. I was just playing this one thing and I was like, oh, I was on this perfect run and I'm jumping and stuff. And then like my toe hit this one guy in 1 pixel, and it's like over. And I'm like, God darn it.
Yes.
And it's like, I don't know. I'm still soul searching on this. I'm just being honest with the podcast.
No, it's
a weird one.
It's a very difficult game, and neither of us made it all the way out of
No.
out of.
And I have
whatever.
save game state. So like, what excuse do I have? I got stuck.
I at least can stop at any time, and it will stay where it is.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't have.
yeah, that's
I can
right.
quit
Good.
out of the. I can quit out of the game without an end game, and it will just stay in that state until I return to it.
Yeah,
So
that's good. Yeah, this does it better.
That's been helpful. Yes.
Yeah.
So I tested that today because I'm going to have to play whatever we're going to play through next, basically tomorrow, because the day after I fly to Portland to celebrate with the team, and I need to be able to come back to it. But I basically have to play as much as I can play tomorrow, whereas you have several days.
Yeah.
So here's hoping I can get past that second Ghost World.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then I mentioned it really quickly. The last thing I had in my notes that I thought was interesting when it comes to the farming life and your examples of going back. And you might have to refresh my memory on Super Mario 1 on this too. Because of the overland kind of world structure that they added into this game, which is a game changer, obviously, for Mario.
Right. It was in some. We've gotten some email. It was in Super Mario 3 as well.
Okay. Right.
So there was an overworld in that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So yeah, our mistake. We're definitely not well educated in this series, at least for 2D. But anyway, in the first one though, when they added this into Super Mario 3 or what have you, like the first one, there was no level select. I'm trying to think. There was no concept.
Super Mario Brothers 1? No, there's no. You start at the beginning of the game and you play until you have no more lives.
Yeah, and there's no concept of.
There are warp gates.
Right,
So
this state. Yeah, we talked
skip,
about that. Yeah,
find ways to skip ahead, but there isn't any sort of way to save where you are. You turn off the machine, it's gone. You die, it's done, and you start over from the beginning. So it's sort of how I'm feeling about each level is that I'm getting really good at the beginning parts. I'm very good at World 1 or so of, and maybe World 1, 2, 1, 3, etc. of Super Mario Brothers. But throw me into one of the World 7s and I'm totally lost and will die very quickly multiple times.
Well,
I think here we're getting so many different mechanics and enemies and things like that so frequently. In a way, it's there all throughout the series, but here it feels amped up to a degree.
Right.
And so each level I'm basically approaching like I would have approached Super Mario Brothers the game. I get really good at the first part of a level, and then I finally break through once, and I never want to play the level again.
Yeah.
So I never get good at the second part, whatever that might be.
Yeah, because you don't. Yeah, of course. Well, and so I mean, related to that, with the world structure, I feel like it's interesting because and they probably learned this from Super Mario 3, but because of the world structure and because you can travel backwards and go and replay levels so easily, that's going to probably, well, not probably, definitely impact the way that they design future levels because they know that you have those resources at your disposal.
To have a feather, exactly.
Yeah, so they're it's not necessarily
and it's necessary, right? One of the things I noticed,
that's the thing is that they didn't have to make it necessary. You know what I mean? Like
no, but that's how they've expanded this world. I know, and part of this is from emails, that there's multiple exits from some of these levels.
Yeah. I'm looking at this website.
Yes, I'm sure you can see.
I'm looking at some of these levels that I've played, and I'm like, holy shit! I feel like in
Donut Plains 1, I feel like there's some blocks up in the clouds, and you need a cape to be able to get to them. So if you have the cape going still, no, that's fine. I know I've seen them, and I just haven't gone back and traced to the end of the level, like where those will take you.
Yeah.
But I know that there's something up there, and I've actually gone up there, and I just haven't gotten good at getting to the second set yet. But I know that they're there.
There's also something else up there that's I've spoiled for myself looking at this site that's very
exactly. So
cool.
If you have all the map, you're going to be able to see these things, and certainly I know this from the emails. That's part of the reason for the open world structure. Be able to go back, find the additional exits, find the other ways to these other places. Now be able to go to those places at will. I know that out of maybe the cheese world, there's a level where you can get all kinds of goodies just walking in with no challenge. It's like a free room. So you just walk in, you get a bunch of stuff, you walk out. Or quit out directly, what have you. I know that somebody's mentioned that to me. So there are places where you can basically get these things, unlock them for yourself, and now you have a resource to just visit as many times as you need to prepare to tackle this next challenge that you have to.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a cool meta layer that I just didn't anticipate. But I specifically the difficulty part of it is what I was focusing on. You know, in that because you have this ability, they're going to balance the game around that ability. You know what I mean? Yes, it's for secrets, and yes, it's for returning to levels, but it also is like, well, because you have that
because you could have as many lives as you want at any given time.
Yeah,
you're going to make these really challenging.
Right, we're going to tune it that way, you know, and so it kind of goes back to some of that mentality we talked about with some of these games of this era is, you know, that you really wanted to get your money's worth out of a game, right? People were going to play it a lot, you know, versus these days where I feel like we blow through games. So it's like, you know, they're going to want to really like you get your money's worth. So maybe that was part of the mentality there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big value proposition. Okay, well, why don't we take a quick break and then we'll come back with some email questions and things like that.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We wanted to do a little bit of your feedback. I believe I gave you the first email, sir.
Yes, from Patrick Holloman, slightly edited, for time's sake. Thank you, Patrick. I actually wrote an entire book about the design of Super Mario World a few years back. Holy cow, really?
Yes, he did, and I will share a link.
Good. It's long, and I don't expect you to read all of it, but I did take a look at some of the things you discussed. For instance, you had talked about the various new mechanics and jumps and how they're different from earlier Mario games, and I actually have some facts about that in the book. This page has all the info about how far and how high Mario can jump at various levels of momentum. He links the webpage. I hope it can be helpful in case you wanted to see some more details about that stuff. Thank you, Patrick. He goes on to say, that said, the vast majority of the book is about the systemic way that levels are designed. Basically, I reverse engineered Nintendo's process for making content. Wow, whoa. All games are iterative. That's not news to you two. But there is a very specific method of iteration which the Super Mario World devs use to craft a majority of their levels. I don't know if Nintendo has a name for it, but I called it Challenge Cadence, quotes, Challenge Cadence Skill Theme, or CCST for short. Patrick is a smarty pants. The best short summary of it on this is on the first page of the book. He gives another link. From page 4 onward, I use this system to analyze every single level in the game. Patrick, that is amazing and awesome, and I will look at that.
Yes, definitely. I will put both of those links in the show notes. The book's a buck or two for those who are interested into going into depth, and it's right there on his site. Lot to. I've interacted with Patrick on Twitter in the past. So thank you, Patrick.
I feel like I've been to Game Design Forum. That's his site?
I believe so. Yes, thegamedesignforum.com.
Yeah, he has Half-Life on here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel like I've been here before. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. I have one from Anthony Halderman who says, I'm excited you're tackling Mario World for the next project, not least because neither of you are really steeped in platformers in your formative years. Whew, you can say that again. Mario World is my personal favorite 2D Mario game as well, so this should be interesting seeing flaws with new eyes after 20-something years. You mentioned the overworld map being new. This is one of the people who emailed us. But Mario 3 on the NES had one too. Mario 3 didn't do nearly as much, though. Just occasionally letting you skip levels, choose between levels, and gate rewards behind levels. This means that when you walk out to Donut Plains in Mario World and suddenly levels can have 2 exits, and there are like 8 different paths, was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That actually seems to be the philosophy behind the whole game. In 1991, the default game type was platformer. That is true, certainly on the consoles. Everyone had played the first 3 Marios, there were loads of good platformers, and even the shovelware was platformers. They assumed you knew how to run and jump, and they wanted to show you what the SNES could do. There's about 4 times the amount of mechanics and corner cases in Mario World than Mario 3, and they dispense with the clear tutorials of Mario 1 because of the expected expertise of the players. Also, you mentioned struggling to succeed and getting game overs and probing forward carefully from saves. They included a mechanic to help with this, farming, and this is something I talked about this time. Thank you to your dryer. This is the first Mario to let you revisit old levels, and you can leave at any time if you've already beaten a level. So if you know there's a feather right at the beginning of a level, you can just go in 3 times so you have a cape and another in reserve. This also helps with the save system, which resets you to 3 lives and Small Mario. Actually, I find it's 5 lives, but I think that's otherwise correct. They even have a place called Top Secret Zone in Donut Plains, which is just one screen with 2 flowers, 2 feathers, and a Yoshi. And if you have a Yoshi, the egg will make a 1-up for all your slow, infinite life needs. So basically you can just go in again and again and again riding Yoshi and get 1-ups. Love your show. Keep up with the classics. And for the future, please consider playing one of the early 3D GTA games. I always preferred San Andreas. I do feel like we need to address a GTA game. I know they're not games you've played in real depth.
No, dabbled, but
yes. I played all of GTA 3. I bounced off of GTA 4 and will not play GTA 5 because I find it objectionable. But I do think there's a lot to talk about in GTA.
Yeah, for academic reasons, I believe I agree with you. So yeah, and sorry about the noise. That's a special guest from our water pipes. Yep. Don't know what that's about, but
I really shouldn't put rocks in there. Okay, so I gave you a second email.
Yes, from James Roberts. A bunch of it looks like you edited out a bunch of stuff, but getting to the meat of it, some discussion. As for some discussion, revisiting this game has reminded me of a fond childhood memory. I am 30 years old, and the SNES was my first console as a kid. It came bundled with Super Mario World, and back then I was lucky to get a new game once a year. I spent a lot of fun afternoons taking turns with my dad playing this game. He became so frustrated with the Forest of Illusion, he says in parentheses, "You'll see," can't wait, that he actually broke down and called the Nintendo helpline to get help. That's awesome. Do you remember those call and hint lines? I'm sure the cost per minute of that call was absurd, but it got us through the Forest of Illusion. For days after, my dad would claim that they made the game hard just so you call in for help, though I never held that belief. Should we answer there? Should I continue?
Yeah. Oh, we can answer that part and we'll continue.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
definitely remember how hint lines, and LucasArts, of course, had a hint line. I only ever used one once. Using the phone at all in my house was a rare thing. I mean, back in the...
Well, they were just invented, so I understand.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I called Alexander Graham Bell myself. No, that in the late 70s and early 80s, I mean, anything but a local call was very expensive.
Yeah.
And I was in a small town, and basically our calling radius was like one of my grandmothers. Maybe both of my grandmothers, and that might have been it, like, of the family. We couldn't call anybody else without being a long-distance call. So my mother would be on the phone with my grandmother all the time, but we really didn't talk to other people on the phone. So it was really... I mean, to this day, I'm not a phone person. Yeah. Because of when I was a child, the phone being kind of a big deal. And... I mean, we did used to use the phone, but it was a local call to call into the mainframe and play games. And my dad would bring home a teletype.
I just don't like talking to people. So,
well, that's true. I'm not people. Anyway, so yeah, I certainly remember the one time I did this. I thought for sure my parents were going to kill me, but I was stuck on Wizard and the Princess, which is an old Sierra game for the Apple II. I just didn't know what to do next, and I was sort of also of the opinion that maybe that was a little unfair, what I had to do next. But they did tell me what I had to do next, and I did find my way out. These days you don't have to do that. You have the internet.
Yeah, no. I believe I did get in trouble various times for using it too much, and Sierra was the main one that I would call. Yeah, and... I agree with your dad sometimes. I think there's
definitely the Sierra games are
there's some shadiness going on there, or maybe it's not even intentional shadiness, but this sort of like, this mentality of like, we're going to make this puzzle pretty hard, and we have the helpline, for somebody who...
Sure, right.
So it's kind of lazy.
It becomes a crutch.
Yeah. Lazy design, yeah. But yeah, it's a good story, by the way, man. Whew. Playing with your dad.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Swapping controllers, that's the best.
So, does he continue from there? I think he
yes. You may remember a few games back, I emailed you guys about the Link to the Past ROM randomizer. Oh, yes. You can play with online. Super Mario World is no stranger to ROM hacks, as you may be aware. The most famous being soul-crushingly difficult, near-frame-perfect skill-requiring monsters of games. At the recent SGDQ event, one of the most famous ROM hacks was Played for Charity, Super Panda World. He gives a link. Creation of new ROM hacks has greatly slowed due to the recent the release of Mario Maker for Wii U, but I always found them to be fascinating fan projects. Thanks, as always, for putting on a quality podcast, and have a good week, James Roberts.
Yes, we actually got another email about modding Super Mario World and reprogramming it using green shells. We'll probably read that next week, but
what does that mean?
Next week. I don't think you'd believe it if I told you.
Okay.
But basically, there's a way to...
No, don't say it. It's a tease, tease for next week.
We'll tease it for next week. All right, we've got one from Eric Anderson. Eric, I believe I have a action figure here that I'm still supposed to send you, and I will try to do that tomorrow before I leave. Now that the game is out, I actually have a little time. Anyway, thanks for writing again. He says, "Hey guys, love the show, one of the few podcasts I listen to. Quick question. I'm curious as to why you picked Mario World over Mario 64. I'm sorry if you already answered this and I missed it. As great as World is, essentially it is a 16-bit expanded version of previous ones with a rideable dinosaur. You mentioned there is an overworld in it, but Mario 3 had one as well, albeit a much smaller and simpler one that did not allow you to return to previous worlds. But 64 was a game changer, not only for the series, but for platformers in general. Also, the new Odyssey game coming out seems more like Mario 64 than any other. I was just wondering, why not 64? Thanks. Best regards, Eric." The short answer is probably we'll play them both.
Yeah, we will. We will play. I mean, Brett had suggested 64 already, and we decided to wait for Odyssey to come out. So we will definitely play that for sure. The reason I suggested Super Mario World, and I'm generalizing here, but I feel like through friends in the industry and through press and people that I, just kind of I guess anecdotally, but I feel like Super Mario World, even though it has elements from other games, just like for instance, why we would play, say, System Shock 2 instead of System Shock 1. It is, Super Mario World seems to be sort of like the zeitgeist of it is that it's, people's favorites, or it's the best of that group, and if we're going to play one 2D Super Mario game, probably the only one we'll play for quite a while, that was the one that rose to the top. Versus, we could have played Super Mario 1 or something like that, but this one felt like a good kind of sweet spot for that era. And I thought we should play a 2D before we do the 3D later as well. Right,
and I think that playing a NES title might have been too punishing.
Well, it seemed, similar to Metroid, right?
Right. That's why certainly Super Mario Brothers 3. To play that, like I said, where if you ever run out of lives, that's it, game over, start at the beginning. Yeah. On our schedule, I just can't imagine that being a thing we could do.
I'd be fine.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Right. Cheater man over here would be totally.
It's like fair. Not even basically not. It's like you're not playing the real game. That's. I feel. I definitely feel bad about it. I don't know. I'm gonna have to find a balance of that.
You don't feel that bad.
I don't feel that bad, but I don't. I'm definitely not getting the pure experience as pure as that. I'm playing the game, but it's just not. Not the full experience.
Well, no, I mean, I would love to be able to get to the second half of that Ghost World and just try it again and again and again right from there.
Yeah.
So that's a thing that I wouldn't mind being able to do. But anyway, those are some of the reasons behind it. Certainly we're going to play Mario 64. I agree. It is groundbreaking and a landmark and really set the stage for all 3D platformers that followed. So it's a must play for us, and we will get to it. But as Tim said, a 2D platformer really seemed like we had to put the horse before the cart, right?
Yeah, that's what I felt. I wanted to do them in that order. Yeah, and
it's going to be more interesting to discuss a 3D one, having talked about a 2D one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going to talk about the two, the progression between the two, and the SNES Classic
and the new problems. That's right. The SNES Classic, the new problems that it addressed.
Yeah.
That it had to address moving to 3D will be much, much more interesting. We kind of touched on one this episode earlier, so I think you'll hear a lot more of that when we get to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely, we will. And
the teaser for that months and months from now, the rabbit. I will say. Do you know what the rabbit story is about that? Does that ring any bells? No. Okay. Well, there's a teaser for you.
It sounds really. Like it's scratching at the back of my brain, like I have some idea what that might mean.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
It's important for how they develop the camera. Rabbit. Okay. Anyway.
All right. We'll get back to that. Yeah, just go ahead and let that lie there. What are we gonna? I didn't look ahead. So what are we gonna play through next?
Let me look at the. Are we done with mails? Okay.
I think we're done. We're done with mails for tonight.
There's Butter. Okay. Twin Bridges. Is after Vanilla Dome, it looks like. And then Forest of Illusion.
Okay. So I guess we want to try to get through the Forest of Illusion?
Yeah, and that's what we should do, yeah. Because then it's Chocolate Island and Valley of Bowser.
Okay.
And then there's a bunch of secret special worlds that on this list I'm looking at that are terrifying me, but I'm guessing those are not. Those are those are optional.
Yes, I think those are probably optional, and I will try to.
Funky, outrageous, mondo, groovy,
sure,
awesome, tubular, gnarly. Are those real things? I'm gonna have to click on one. Oh no. Okay.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So we may or may not get to any of the special worlds, but it sounds like at least for next time we're going to try to play Twin Bridges. Forest of Illusion, which is what put James's father through such trouble years ago. We'll see if we get to the same sort of place. I can just imagine what it's going to be like for me, because basically I need to try to play all of that tomorrow.
Oh no, you're so...
I'm probably in trouble. I may not make it, but that's fine. We want to thank everyone who sent an email. We had a lot of email this week, so we didn't get to all of it, and we still have a backlog of reviews we're trying to get through. We will try to get to those as quickly as we can. I've been working so much, but now I've loosened up a little bit, so I have a little bit more time, and life should be a little easier for me for the next little while. So you can shoot us email at devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Brett_Duville, and he is
At Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Of course, the podcast is at Dev Game Club, and you can find us on the web at devgameclub.com. And of course, in Apple Podcasts, where we'd love to have your reviews, and any other podcatcher of your choice. Thanks so much for listening, and good night.
Good night.
Well, I haven't plugged them in a while, but I also want to say our outro music is from Giant Rat /Ficus. Thanks, Giant Rat.